Welcome back, everyone. Very happy to see a good number of you back again and maybe a few new faces. We are going to start back from the beginning again, so you will have heard before if you were here last week, the first 15, 20 minutes, so don't be surprised. Maybe it'll register even better. I'm very happy to welcome Elicia Goldsworthy. She's a registered professional forester, currently serving as a policy and communications manager for Green Diamond Resource Company in California. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Natural Resources Management and a Master of Science in Forestry Sciences from Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, and brings more than 20 years of experience working across California with large and small private landowners. Her background spans reforestation and vegetation management, botany and plant pathology, including protocol level resource surveys and sustainable forest management certification, including Forest Stewardship Council and Sustainable Forestry Initiative programs. Previously, she served as Green Diamond's silviculture investments manager, providing leadership for programs such as reforestation, vegetation management, and nursery production. And she has worked in technical forestry roles such as forest ecology, consulting, and applied research. She was appointed by Governor Gavin Newsom to the California Board of Forestry and Fire Protection, where she serves as the chair of the Forest Practice Committee and member of the Zone Zero Regulatory Advisory Committee. She's a resident of Arcata, where she lives with her husband, their two children, and a very sassy dog. He's wonderful. Elicia, it's all yours. Hopefully our technology works all the way through today. Thank you so much for coming back.
Thank you, Jane, and good afternoon, everyone. Many apologies for what happened last week. Hopefully we can just chug on through this one. So I'm going to share my screen. How's that look, Jane?
Um, it looks fine. It's
Okay.
all there.
What's that?
It's all there, nothing extra.
Okay. Okay. And then are you guys seeing the controls, or is that just on my screen?
That's just on your screen.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, well, good afternoon. Thank you for that bio, Jane. Happy to answer any other questions as we go. When we get to the slide where my computer crashed, I'll try to answer the question that was in the chat at the time, which was about how Green Diamond supports Cal Poly Humboldt, I think was the question that was in the chat. So I'll go ahead and get started. So I'll try to not belabor on the stuff that we already talked about, but Green Diamond Resource Company, we used to be just in Washington and California. We had two people doing our government affairs and sustainability work. We were pretty small. We've grown pretty substantially in the last 5 to 10 years. We're now at 2.2 million acres under management. I think, we bob between third and fourth largest landowner in the US. We own land in Oregon, Washington, Montana, and California. And then we manage a portfolio in the Southeast United States where we're a partial owner. We were founded in 1890. The company is still family owned. It is governed by a board of directors that is over 50% at all times members of the family. Sol Simpson founded the company in 1890, and it continues to be a family run. We're not publicly traded. The president of the company asks us to think and act in the long term and to be really managing for it, like the grandchildren of the family. We're sitting at about 380 employees, and we're active in 9 states. So I touched on this last time, but just, in terms of a company and who we are and what do we ask our employees to do, is really thinking and acting in the long term. Like I said, we're family owned, we're not publicly traded. We have up years and down years, economically, and we are pressured to make certain decisions. And in the governance of the company is really about thinking about multiple generations. Forestry is a multi-generational proposition. Profits are they peak and valley along with lumber markets, which are closely tied to housing markets, which are closely tied to interest rates. And so we just kind of feel the fits and starts of any economic boom and bust. And then when the economy slows and people stop selling and buying houses and doing repair and remodel, you really feel it in the wood product sector. So we have to think and act in the long term and make our decisions, thinking about in the next 50 to 100 years ahead. And, recently the president and the leadership in the company are really thinking about investing where we can add value. And so we're looking at conservation easements, carbon projects, changing the way that we're managing, and always open to kind of thinking about other ways. We've had really great relationships with local recreational groups. The Redwood Coast Mountain Bike Association has been an important part of how we're kind of thinking about, value, not in the terms always of the dollar, but value in what you're giving back to your community in the form of like recreational access in that case. So value to our leadership can mean a lot of different things. It's not always profitability. And then just being great in the woods. And really that kind of leads into our core values. Safety is really important to the company. Logging remains, in that sort of those upper tier of dangerous jobs. And so we're always looking for ways to get people out of the bite, to make sure that our staff is working safely. And we've moved to a lot of automation in places where we feel like we have staff they're at risk. And so the industry as a whole is moving towards getting people off the ground and into protected cabs of equipment, finding ways to use drones to move materials around, and just really thinking about, safety as part of our culture, as a core component of our culture. Integrity is incredibly important. We want to do what we say we're doing. We're not trying to greenwash anything. We're really honest and open about, we are a forest management company. Our lands are zoned for timber production, and we are seeking to balance conservation with the sustainable production of timber. So we are growing trees, for the express purpose in some places for harvest, and for the express purpose in other places for conservation. So we're really balancing those things. We seek to do what we say that we're doing. So that's the integrity piece. Stewardship, again, we are really trying to walk that fine line of making sure that we're meeting really meaningful conservation goals. We're third-party certified in all of our lands, either Sustainable Forestry Initiative or FSC. And we'll get into a little bit of the FSC since we're in California. That's where we're Forest Stewardship Council certified, and we'll deep dive on that. Community is incredibly important. We carve out a portion of our profits every year to make sure that we're reinvesting in the community. We have to spread that across, the 9 states that we're working in. But you'll see Green Diamond's logos, on the back of the blood mobile. We've made, we host quarterly blood drives. We put a bunch of money into the hospital in Southern Humboldt to help Garberville with their seed fund to get a hospital started. We're just looking for ways that we can support the community, even if it's, a couple $100 for employees, children's baseball teams, or whatever it can be. We're looking to reinvest always back into the community. And then, of course, like I said, the integrity piece, we are a for-profit business, and that's who we are. And we have to be thinking about the decisions that we're making in terms of how we keep the company whole and solvent and in the black, because that's who we are, and that's what we're doing here. So a little more about, as a whole, 100% of the lands that Green Diamond owns and manages are either certified by the Forest Stewardship Council or the Sustainable Forestry Initiative. We have about 1.5 million acres that are all managed under federal and state fish and wildlife conservation agreements. Those have been incredibly meaningful. They stabilize some of the regulatory burden, as well as having some pretty phenomenal outcomes for wildlife. I think there's a lot of things that people say about the outcomes on working forests, but we have the monitoring to show that you can really have your cake and eat it too. We have 61 species directly covered by conservation agreements through either the company and our partnership with Twin Creeks, 6 conservation agreements in place across 4 states. And really, we're asking a lot of our forests. We're growing sustainable wood fiber for society. We're measuring and producing biodiversity outcomes. We're maintaining water quality and quantity, sequestering and storing carbon. We're supporting rural economies. We're finding ways to offer access for recreational use while keeping the public and our employees safe. And we're looking to provide biomass and sites for renewable energy facilities. Happy to answer any questions on that. So just to zero in on California, our ownership spans, all the way up to the northern end of Del Norte County. Let me move this so it's not in the way. Sorry, just give me a second. Let me hide those. That's better. All the way up to Smith River, and then I don't know if you guys can see my pointer. This is our Moore track. This is over on Highway 199 at the state border. 100% of this burned in the Slater fire. It was one of the fastest moving fires. I think it was back in 2020, 2021. And then we're mixed in here with Redwood National and State Parks, Yurok Reservation, Hoopa Reservation. We got national parks here and then state parks in the purple. So we have a lot of really interesting neighbors. We're always balancing kind of what our land management looks like against other people's land management and trying to find, a pathway forward. Certainly when we talk about wildfire, we're thinking about fire protection and how we're protecting communities in and around places where we have shared boundaries. We do have this piece down here in Garberville, and then we picked up about 19,000 acres in northern Mendocino County in and around Willits that's not shown on this map. Jane, you'll have to interrupt me if there's any questions or anything because I can't see.
Will do.
Okay, thank you.
How are you dealing with protection of the spotted owl and Pacific fisher?
Yeah, let's get into that. We'll get into that. So thank you. So research and conservation really are the priorities. One of the benefits of being a large landowner in California, we have 400,000 acres, and some of those large portions of those acres are contiguous. So managing for northern spotted owl, this is including the gopher tortoise, which is one of our species that we manage for in the South. The rest of these are California species. So northern spotted owl, Humboldt martin, and we also have a conservation plan for sensitive and rare plants. And so how we're managing for those things is that we have protection measures in place. We have commitments that we have made through long-term conservation agreements, so habitat conservation plans, memorandums of understanding. We have a special habitat plant conservation plan that we do. We have a lot of agreements. We have multiple HCPs, multiple programmatic agreements, and really it's a constant, cultivating of relationships with our agency partners to make sure that we're hitting these conservation goals while we're still staying in business. And so it's really finding a balance in those things. And what's interesting about privately owned lands and private working forests is that because of these conservation agreements, we're doing the monitoring and we have the data that can show you where the animals are, how their populations are doing. It's just this ongoing sort of data collection, whether we're talking about fisheries or we're talking about terrestrial species. Really important right now, I think there's a lot of conversation around forests and forest ability to provide for water balance and where water is stored. I think it's really important that we kind of take a beat and understand that 30% of the nation's drinking water comes from privately owned forests. These are rivers, lakes, and streams and forests that enable a variety of species to flourish. They generate rainfall, which hopefully is helping prevent risks of wildfire and drought. I think we're really lucky up here, in Humboldt, Del Norte, Mendocino counties. Some of that risk is mitigated by climate, but not all of it, and certainly not in the fall. I think we all get a little uncomfortable in the fall when lightning comes through. So we're continuing to work on fuels reduction projects and protecting these forests because we understand that they are a really important part of the water balance altogether. So like I said, we follow rigorous third-party sustainability standards. Here in California, we're certified under the Forest Stewardship Council's rubric. So what does sustainable forestry look like and how does that differ? Really, we're optimizing our logging technology for safety and efficiency. We're protecting soil through erosion control and soil stability and compaction prevention for soil health. We're using native seed sources and we produce our own trees locally in California. We're looking at post-harvest reforestation, so that we're, putting back whatever we're taking. We're engaged in sort of intermediate thinning for forest resilience. We're doing a lot of thinning work now, particularly for fields reduction on all of our mainline roads and ridges and places where we think that are very strategic. We've been working with CAL FIRE to look at in and around our communities. Now that we have sort of another community forest in McKinleyville, we're working on some field reduction projects in that block that we own in McKinleyville that's surrounded by, Blue Lake, Fieldbrook, Backtown, all of that, wanting to do as much field work as we can in there because we got people mountain biking and hiking, and we're right up against that community forest now. We're working on invasive species control. That's always kind of this uphill battle. In any area on the North Coast, things just grow so well here. We follow the California State Forest Practice Rules, are hands down the most rigorous forest practice rules anywhere in the nation. And part of that is limiting annual harvest for sustained yield. We never cut over, we're at about 1.5% of growth year over year is what our harvest rates are.
You have a question. At what age do you harvest second growth redwoods?
Yeah, so we're actually depending on where you are on the property, we're either in the second or third cycle. The base age for harvest is 50 to 55. It's a 50-year base age. So it depends. It depends where you're at. In some of our stands, the trees are in their like 65 to 72 years old. In some of our stands, right when they hit 50, we're in doing, harvest activities. We're thinning right around 35 is the sweet spot. If we can get in thin redwood, it responds really well to being thin, but not all of our forests are redwood forests. We have a lot of Doug fir and tan oak. And then when you get really close to the coast, we have a lot of spruce, that kind of redwood spruce hem fir mix that's really close to the ocean, where we get a lot of spruce.
So
But it depends.
that's part of what you market is these other. Do you just market redwood or do you mark the other trees?
No, yeah, no, we try to use everything. The spruce is probably the toughest species to move, which is really kind of tragic because it's this very fast-growing species. But the wood is very soft and there's just not a lot of uses for spruce, which is a bummer. But we have a hem fir mix that mostly goes to North Fork Lumber. But we ship everything out of the woods. And then tan oak, when we ship tan oak, we either ship it to the chip dock, which I'll get into here in a minute, some of the diversification of the business. Or we've delivered like multiple loads to local tribal counterparts who are using like tan oak for firewood. And those loads are typically just donated. And we have a relationship with the Yurok tribe where we're delivering tan oak for their elders firewood program. And it's tan oak that's close, and usually we just donate those. If they have an interest in more, they can buy a load, and then we just really sell that at cost.
Do you work with the local tribes in protecting against wildfires, and do you do prescribed burning, etc.?
Yeah, we do hazard mitigation burning, so we burn our piles. We're not super engaged in broadcast fire, but I think, we just met with the Yurok tribe last week and had conversations around how we could do some sort of shared projects that are more proximal to Klamath and to the Yurok boundaries. We don't do a ton of broadcast burning because we like having the slash on the ground. It helps keep the weeds down. So we're kind of doing this balance of, under our FSC certification, we're trying to control our herbicide use. And when you do prescribed fire in a forest setting, particularly in an even age unit, the vegetation response can be really aggressive. So we kind of are bigger fans of piling, burning those piles, and then planting those piles and kind of leaving a layer of slash on the ground. It's a soil stabilizer, it's a plant. It just kind of keeps the weeds down. And so, if we get a broadcast, that's fine, but we're not actively engaged in broadcast burning. If CAL FIRE wanted to,
what is broadcast burning? Sorry.
Yeah, so like piling the slash and burning it versus laying, like just sort of letting a fire burn through a harvest unit or like what you see in the parks, which is different because the fuel loading on the ground is different. So this gets very nuanced and complicated really quickly, but I would say we don't just set fire on the ground and let it burn through a unit. We kind of pile up the residuals, burn
Okay,
those,
I get it.
and then, yeah, and then plant those.
Okay.
Kind of like, the work that we're doing, leaving the slash in the tops of the trees to cycle back into the soil is kind of part of the whole system. We don't want to just burn everything and have it. We don't want a bunch of bare mineral soil. That's not the goal. And so having the slash in the tops of the trees and all of that still out in the forest is actually really helpful for nutrient cycling and soil stabilizing and kind of keeping the weeds down. That's the goal. We're dealing with Mother Nature, so she always laughs last. So Jane, did I answer all your questions?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Okay. So what are we doing? We talked about kind of diversification and sort of all the things that we're trying to sort of ask of our local forests. Obviously, sustainably managed forests for fiber production, logs that get sold to mills that become boards that are either decks, fences, homes, utilizing that wood, that's sort of its highest and best use. We're really interested in co-investment and management. The company has a long history of buying timberland that was cut over and sort of shepherding that back into being, mature stands that can be harvested and rotated and continuing to be managed for timber production. So there are places where there's still forest land that, like we're looking for opportunities to co-invest and manage those lands to get them back into being forests or just to make sure that they continue to be forest. And we don't always have to be, the sole landowner in that or the sole owner in that scenario. We're fully engaged in natural climate solutions. There's interesting markets that are building out around biodiversity markets. They're not very mature, but there's certainly it's a national discussion that's happening. We're active in both the compliance-based, California Air Resources Board carbon markets and also voluntary carbon markets, mostly outside of California, because there's sort of not the same level of rigor outside of California they don't have an agency like the ARB. So if something like that matured in Washington and Oregon, we would have an interest in participating. But for now, the voluntary market sort of serves that need the best. And then what I think what's most interesting about Green Diamond in California and in Humboldt Bay is the chip export business. We have global customers that are very interested in an FSC certified chip, and they like that chain of custody. They like the third-party audit that comes with it. And those, we'll get into the chip doc here in a minute, but the chip export facilities is really an important part of our business. We don't have biomass power on the coast anymore. There isn't really anywhere for low value wood waste to go. So when there are, subsidies or opportunities for biomass and renewable energy, we're very interested in taking those and doing that work. But it's kind of hit and miss, and it comes with various administrations, and it just sort of depends. Nothing has been stable enough, like, a 10-year subsidy to pay for trucking of low value material. So it's a bigger problem, I think, that the state is trying to solve, particularly in the context of wildfire. Certainly our best options on the coast right now is our chip export facility that helps us move some low value wood. So to your question, Jane, where some
Of course.
yeah. So like some of our lower, so like, Douglas fir and redwood obviously are our high value species, but there's so many other species that are out there that are part of the harvest routine that they're valued almost, they get turned into chips and become power or pulp or get used for sort of upcycled into other materials.
I do have a different kind of question. You periodically buy properties that have been cut by others, and my question is, can you revive the underground mycelium, which is probably starved when there's clear cutting of the forest? Do you monitor the mycelium because it's so important in feeding the trees? It's a mutual symbiotic relationship.
Yeah, right. So my background in botany, I'm very familiar with this topic, and no, we're not like soil sampling. I think, depending on where you are in the state and what forest you're in, really the residuals have everything to do with the diversity of species. So, even in an old growth forest, you're going to have a certain composition of soil biota that is reflective of the species that are above ground. For the stuff that's, ectomycorrhizal and endomycorrhizal on root structures. So we're not, when we're looking at timberland, which I will tell you is incredibly competitive, it is very hard to be successful at purchasing timberland right now. Our most recent purchase was Willits Woods, and really we purchased that because it had a carbon project on it that needed to be made whole, and it made really good sense with the rest of our property. But we bought that because we were successful in bidding on it. I think there's, folks are bidding on anything that comes up, but timberland does not come up very often, and certainly not timberland in areas that make sense for green diamond. So no, we're not monitoring, soil biota. We're not using that as a way of informing our decisions. And if you want to get into a heated debate about clear cutting, we can do that when I get off, I'd like to kind of get through the slide deck, and then we can open it up and have some discussion. I know timber harvest can be a very lightning rod issue. And I'm not here to change anyone's mind on that. Jane asked me to share what Green Diamond is doing, and so I'm here to share that. But for the species that I personally am most interested in, part of the FSC stewardship that we do is keeping a mix of species out there. So I'll say, for example, right out in the backyard, if we have pure redwood, we're going to have a really specific set of fungal organisms associated with that, ectomycorrhizal fungal organisms associated with redwood. If there are species in the Panacea that are mixed in there, so if you have Douglas fir, maybe there's some spruce and pine and whatever, you get more heterogeneity in the mycelium. And so you're going to see, interestingly, cooler plants, as an example. So we have certain species like ghost pipe and the Monaceae that are fully associated with, ectomycorrhizae, which is associated with the species that are above ground, which is then like the cool plants that you get as a result. And so now I'm on a total tangent. So we can talk more about that at the end if you like.
That's fine. Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Yes,
that.
we're thinking about it. No, we don't have specific management for it. But it is definitely something that our botany crews are thinking about, our wildlife crews are thinking about, because it's all part of the bigger ecosystem. Okay, so, carbon's a big deal right now, particularly with wildfire. I think wanting to make sure that we're putting these projects together, and then we're finding a way to sort of protect these projects from wildfire so they actually have a climate impact. And we see forests as a really important part of that, having forest offsets as part of the bigger climate solution. So right now we have about 751,000 acres in carbon sequestration projects. I want to say about 55,000 of that is in California in the CARB market. I have to pull up my, anyways, we can get to that if there's questions. Anyways, like I said, we're in voluntary and compliance markets. As of, in 2022, we estimated about 112 million metric tons of carbon dioxide sequestered in our forests. Okay, so 751,000 acres in sequestration projects, 628 in offsets, and about 81,000 acres in projects that are undergoing a feasibility assessment. So we're really interested in how this makes sense with our improved forest management and balancing carbon with that. I'm going to skip this because this isn't really relevant in California, and get to this because I do think, I think this is an important conversation that we're having across the state right now, which is, I think it was from 2021 to 2023, Governor Newsom basically, through the wildfire task force has invested $6 billion in fuels reduction projects. And that conversation has been phenomenal to watch, landowners get engaged in fuels reduction and all of these projects that get put on the ground. And then you kind of have to ask the question of then what? Where does all of that material go? Some of it gets piled and burned, some of it gets masticated, But to really get to scale to do fuels reduction work, you're really talking about understory thinning and low value wood waste, and there really just isn't a great place for it to go. So the wood chip facility is a really interesting proposal because we can take small residual pieces of wood from sawmills that would have otherwise been waste. We can chip materials that are in the woods that don't have value as logs. And then, we truck them to our facility in Humboldt Bay. It's one of the only 3 West Coast facilities that can load an ocean-going wood chip vessel. And then the end markets are really, and right now, the Japanese and Chinese pulp mills. Our Japanese customers, like I said, are very interested in FSC certified wood chips. So we see, it's just kind of that like wanting to make the most out of the material that's coming out of the woods and having an option that then is in an end market that's actually useful. Paper, diaper fluff, some of it's burned for energy. Japan, after Fukushima, moved away from nuclear energy and has been looking at biomass as part of an energy solution. So just kind of a shout out for some of the like less sexy forestry stuff, which is like, where does all of the waste go? And nobody really wants to talk about that. I think it's really important if we're going to be serious about, mitigating for wildfire. All right, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about our Forest Stewardship Council certification. We have been certified now for 10 years. I think we got certified, I want to say 2012, we started really taking a deep dive, and by 2013, 2014, we were certified. The Forest Stewardship Council is a global nonprofit organization. So there's FSC International as kind of the mothership. And its mission is really to promote environmentally sound, socially beneficial, economically prosperous management of the world's forests. So it was established in '93. It was the first sustainability certification of its kind, and is widely trusted by NGOs, businesses, and consumers. It requires that third-party certification bodies annually assess and monitor compliance with the principles and criteria. So we have 2 certifications that we keep. We keep a forest management certificate, and we keep a chain of custody. The chain of custody is really important for the chip dock, and the FM certification is really important for where our logs go and the chain of custody that's tied to that. So the forest management standard, actually this year we will start implementing version 2. There has been, I think the last 8 years, a revision of the existing forest management standard. So there's kind of FSC International, and then there are regional offices throughout the world where there's forests basically, and there's an appetite for sustainability and sideboards. It's all voluntary. As a landowner, you choose to participate. The economic premise is that if FSC certified materials then have access to a marketplace beyond kind of your average marketplace where wood products are sold. I always kind of try to compare it to, like, I'm willing to pay a little bit more for locally grown, I go to the farmer's market and buy locally grown vegetables that are organic, and I'm willing to pay a little bit more for that because the landowner kind of went above and beyond in their sustainability commitment, right? So, that's really FSC's intent in forestry, is to set a set of rules and principles that maybe aren't captured in state forest practice rules, and to have that be consistent. So throughout the United States, if anyone is FSC certified, they have to follow these principles and all of the criteria that go with them. So it's kind of this base standard that goes across the United States, regardless of the state forest practice rules, anywhere you are, whether you're in Indiana or Michigan or Washington or Idaho. Everybody's playing by the same set of rules, if you will, conforming to the voluntary rules. So what's in there? Compliance with FSC laws and principles. So these are national, state, and local laws. So it does tie in the state forest practice rules. It does tie in, anything in California's labor laws. All of that stuff gets sort of tied in here. They look at your compliance with existing laws. In principle 2, you're looking at land title, dispute resolution. Do you have the right to own this land? Are your property lines accurate? Are your corners in? Are your deeds up to date? Is all your paperwork in order? It's like when you get pulled over by the police, you have all of your paperwork, right? So these are your ownership details. Principle 3, Indigenous people's rights. This is in the next version that we do. This is a really big deal. This is a global issue. This is not just a U.S. issue. Everything from, people that have never had interaction outside of their villages and making sure that that privacy is protected, to making sure that we're consulting with our local tribes and doing projects together and trying to find areas of mutual interest where we're working together. There's just so much work to do here, and so much work that we've done here, that Green Diamond has done here. Principle 4, getting into the social and economic community. So it's everything from workers' rights. Green Diamond has one of the last union logging crews. So, our relationship with the union and the logging crews that are union crews is part of this certificate and gets looked at when we get audited. And then again, with our community relations, how are we invested in the community? How are we participating? How is our money benefiting? How is the profit that the company is making benefiting back to the community? Principle 5 is really about, for us, we don't do a lot of, we don't produce maple syrup or market bark. We don't do greenery because of sudden oak death limitations and moving things out of the zone of infestation. But if you were a forest manager and those were things that you wanted, pine boughs or barks materials, this would be something that you would get audited under, is sort of how are you sustainably managing the benefits from the forests that are non-timber. We do have a relationship with many of our tribal counterparts, and collections of hazel, bark, bear grass. These are all kind of relationships that we have and access that we provide. But we don't get audited on that because we're not making any money on it. It's not the sort of thing that we're doing at scale. It's more really about compliance with Principle 3 or conformance with Principle 3 to make sure that people are getting access to some of their traditional materials. Principle 6, 7, and 8 and 9 are really kind of the nuts and bolts. I mean, this is the meat of what it means to be FSC certified. And so, assessing your environmental impact, having a forest management plan, all the monitoring and assessment that goes with that, and then maintenance of high conservation values. All of this stuff is available online on Green Diamond's website. You can get full access to all of our monitoring, all of our management plan. Everything that we're doing is available on our website. I'll make sure and then Principle 10 doesn't matter. We don't manage plantations. That's sort of like trees and rows. So just a quick dive on how the standard is structured, right? There's these high level principles. So it's like the highest organizational level. We just went through the principles. So let's look at Principle 3, Indigenous people's rights. This is really important. So the criteria is really the measure of judging whether or not the principle has been fulfilled. So when we get audited, these are the things that the auditors are looking at. So then an example is looking at criteria 3.2. The forest management shall not threaten or diminish, directly or indirectly, the resources or tenure rights of Indigenous peoples. And then there's indicators that help you break down whether or not you're meeting that. So every audit that we go through for all 9 of the principles that we're audited on, there are multiple criteria and indicators that are looked at as part of that audit. So all of that is in addition to compliance with the State Forest Practice Act and rules and habitat conservation plans. So you get really, I don't know that you could regulate a landscape any more than California's timberlands are regulated, particularly if they have third-party certification. There's so many rules that we're following. And regardless of how you feel about timber harvest, there's evidence-based outcomes that we can point to tell you if things are working or not. And if they're not working, then we have adaptive management strategies to change all of that. So I feel like the business is constantly evolving. As soon as I think I know what we're doing, we're talking about maybe making a small shift here or a big shift there. Okay, so the point of all of this is that everywhere that we're working, we are subject to state regulations as well as third-party regulations. So some of the similarities between those standards, they both have 3 chamber boards. They all have 3 third-party audits. They all have public consultation on the standard development. So as the standards get revised, which right now we're working on the version 2, we'll be working from with FSC. There was public engagement on that for 8 years. They all have performance-based outcomes. So it's, you say you're doing this, did you measure it? Are you hitting that target? Obviously, there's a reforestation requirement. That seems really obvious, but you would be amazed at how many people come out on a forest tour and didn't think that we had to plant after we harvested. It's mind-boggling that folks have this very outdated perception of what forestry looks like, particularly in California. We are committed to conservation of high biodiversity areas. There's a significant portion of the timberlands that are actually not managed for timber production because they are managed for species conservation. Then there's the recognition and respect of Indigenous people's rights. You'll see that throughout both of the certifications, and protection of water quality. That water quality should probably be at the top because it's first and foremost, it's present in most of our management activities. We are protecting for water quality. And then just a couple notes about, where we are in the community. We're trying to show up. We're at truck parades. We're at career fairs. We're anywhere anyone asks us to be, or at least we're trying to be. It depends on markets and staffing and availability of people. But, we have about 150 employees in here locally. And we live here. Our kids go to school here. We're real people with real feelings and rights, just like anyone else. And we're in your community. We're trying to be in your schools. If folks need trees for career fairs, we are trying to be there for that. We're making donations in places wherever we can be, that we can try to be helpful. So we're volunteering. We've got internship and scholarship programs. We're engaged in civic and professional engagement, and then student outreach in the classroom and field tours. So someone had asked, right when my computer crashed, how we were helping with Cal Poly Humboldt. And I would say for the forestry department, Green Diamond is almost an extension of the classroom for the forestry program. It's got to be somewhere in the 20 to 30 field tours every year that we do. We participate with the Forestry Institute for Teachers. We're hosting and bringing folks out to the woods as much as possible whenever they want to go so that they can see, they can come to their own decisions about what's happening out in the forest. And so particularly for Cal Poly Humboldt, we have kind of this, we have staff that help out to teach classes, but I really feel like we're an extension of the classroom where if you want to see active timber harvest, that's where you go. And Jane, you asked about our tribal neighbors. Green Diamond executed, it took 10 years to do, but the return of Blue Creek to the Yurok tribe, it's about 50,000 acres that went back to Yurok. That was a transaction that happened between Green Diamond and the Yurok tribe. It was important, it's this right part of the center of their universe. It's part of their origin story. And our leadership felt like it was really, it was something that we needed to figure out how to get that land back into Yurok stewardship. So we're really proud of that relationship. I know folks have really strong opinions here about what it needs to happen next, but we're in ongoing conversations about what it looks like to be partnered with the tribes and recognition of them as a tribal counterpart and a neighbor, and how we all kind of coexist together. Okay, so, for folks that have an interest in working in the woods, I never thought that I would end up in this position doing public affairs. I'm a registered professional forester. I wanted to work in the woods. I didn't really want to deal with people all the time, and I wanted to stay fit. So, those are the kinds of jobs that we offer, right? And everything across that whole spectrum, from forestry to high-level GIS types of jobs. And so we've got forest carbon managers, we've got director jobs, GIS jobs, forest resource jobs, which is really like if you're really heavy into spreadsheets, truck drivers, road engineers, aquatic biology. Our biology staff actually outnumbers our forestry staff. I think the point here is just that we're really seeking to kind of capture every kind of job on the job spectrum, whether you're thinking about being in the field and just doing field type work, or whether you want to work, in a GIS room doing LiDAR based assessments. We're trying to be, a good employer, paying competitive wage jobs, and also being a really fun place to work because you get to work outside with some of these jobs and get a firsthand view of some of the successes. That gentleman down there holding the fish, Pat Ryder, he gets to see, the proof in the pudding. The water's running clear and there's fish in the creek in basins that we own almost the entire basin, and it's chock full of anadromous salmonids and other herps. So this is more outreach for other folks. So I'm going to end that there, Jane, because I am going to guess maybe there's some stuff in the chat.
There are a couple of things. Does Green Diamond evaluate privately owned forested properties?
You mean for other folks? No,
Yeah.
I mean like as a service?
Yes.
What do you mean, John?
John, are you there?
I mean, I would say we don't go out and we don't go do work for other private landowners in terms of like appraisals or volume estimates or any of those types of things. We would only do that for land that we're actually interested. And then that becomes highly confidential. Those are confidential numbers. The only thing that we would farm out, I think we have an interest in we're starting to have an interest in can we provide a service with our logging crews? Can some of our technical expertise with the heavy equipment serve a purpose on other lands? And do we have a space there? Because there's such a limited number of operators. Okay, John's off mute.
Yep. Thank you. I just wondered, we moved here about 2 years ago, and we have a small acreage that's forested. And I just wondered if you came out and maybe evaluated it.
We wouldn't, but we would be happy to put you in touch with a number of consulting foresters that work here. BBW is an outfit, Jim Abel's outfit. I don't know if NRM is still, I think NRM might be. Anyways, we can put you in touch with some folks. There are some really great local consulting foresters who are really good at working with small landowners and helping you do what fits for your property.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to tackle the AI question because that is something that so I have two teenagers, one of whom is a musician and an artist. And we have some interesting discussions about AI at the dinner table and what his future looks like. And we're looking at how we incorporate AI into the business and what that looks like. So I'm kind of always balancing this. Our president, Douglas Reed, made a really great analogy the other day that hit home with me, which was that when typists had a job as a typist, and then they created typewriters and then computers, those people didn't necessarily lose their jobs. They just changed the way they worked. And so I think being in forestry, AI might not come for us as quick as it will come for some other industries, but we are being asked to sort of have AI help us do our work better, not replace us. I have the pleasure of getting to work on legislation on behalf of the company, and it has been interesting to watch some of the bills that have come out to protect workers who've been displaced by AI jobs. And I think just like rights for people in the workplace when AI becomes almost a replacement. I think in the forest sector, it's going to take some time because so much of the work that we do is really hands-on work. AI is not going to go out and measure trees. But AI may help you generate a bullet for a weekly report or refine the language in your timber harvest plans. And so we are kind of exploring, are there ways that AI can be helping us with some of the reporting that we're doing? We collect a phenomenal amount of data. We spend a ton of time writing reports. We post all of that online. Maybe there's a role for AI in editing and working on some of that. But even with our legal team telling us like, yes, use AI and then go back and check it, because as you know, it's like obviously the first iteration of whatever gets spit out is not necessarily accurate. So I think for us, it's going to be a slow roll, but certainly we've been asked to find a way to be more efficient and to have, I tried to use AI to like read a bill for me the other day and give me like the high points of a bill just because I'm 50 and my eyes are tired. And so it's kind of nice to have some help if something gives you a bulleted list. So that's kind of how I see it right now. I think some of the hands-on jobs are just going to, not be replaced by AI anytime soon. And I hope I'm right about that. Okay, so go ahead,
What do you
Jane.
see as the future of forest products industry in the North Coast? It seems to have really declined over the years.
Yeah, it has. I don't know. I serve on the State Board of Forestry and Fire Protection, and I think in the last couple of years, wildfire has really informed so much of whether it's like your ability to get your home insured, to the defensible space regulations that we're working on, like in the Zone Zero Committee, to how forests are being managed and what people expect of their local forests. I really worry that wildfire has particularly homeowners interested in building with, non-combustible materials. And I get that. I understand it if you can't get your home insured, but I do worry about the sustainability piece to that, trees grow, they sequester and store carbon, they can be harvested sustainably to build homes and communities in a way that is safe with defensible space and home hardening measures. I'm deeply concerned about communities building with concrete and steel, not just because those materials, they can be recycled, but they're not renewable. And I think there's pretty good evidence in communities that build with concrete and steel that like the heat absorption and then, the heat that's let out at night can have a pretty significant impact on nighttime cooling temperatures. And so maybe I'm not answering the question because I'm off on a rant, but I don't know about the future of forestry in the North Coast. I think there's some real social challenges around timber harvest in a community like ours. And I think that wildfire prevents some pretty intriguing social challenges. So I worry about really our tie to the housing industry and what housing looks like in California and where that material comes from. We have to rebuild all of the footprint of the Palisades fire, and a lot of folks down there, they really don't want to build with combustible materials. So that, I'm concerned. I would say that much.
Any other questions?
Connie, I see you came off mute.
So you've located me, right? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Can you hear Connie?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a wildfire survivor from Los Angeles in the last year and a half.
I'm sorry.
I'm up in Eureka because my son is studying at Humboldt State in forestry. It happens to be a coincidence, maybe not. So I kind of wonder, you've listed issues that I wish I was concerned about or had addressed, that we were vulnerable. A house built in 1960 in just below a forest up in the hillside. I don't know if you're familiar with that area.
I am.
And there is a forest behind us, the Los Angeles County Forest. Altadena is precisely the area we're from. And our house was consumed in very short time. And so were all the neighbors. Some were not. Okay, the brick houses with the tile roofs were not consumed.
Yeah.
So I find your information helps me understand uh, what I could have done to react more quickly to the smoke was prevalent several hours before it reached our area. I didn't think it was that vast. And it was extremely windy, a rare torrential wind. So I'll leave all those factors with you. The wind is really the contributing factor. Thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And I'm so glad that you're safe, and I'm so sorry for what you've been through. In the last 14 months, I've been serving on that Zone Zero committee, specifically at the direction of the governor's executive order to address the defensible space regulation in that first 5 feet around your home. And I just got back 2 weeks ago from Calabasas with survivors from Palisades and Eaton fires, and have been in the room with those folks. And we've been working really closely, and the governor's office has been very engaged. And it's so nuanced. I mean, that particular fire, the average wind speed was 92 miles an hour. So even with defensible space and home hardening, I think evacuating and having a backup plan is the right thing to do. I think like all of this is chance, but the defensible space and the home hardening measures combined, the changing of your vents and clearing the first 5 feet around your house, or we're about to roll out a regulation that's pretty flexible. And of course you could do more than what the base regulation requires. But I think that combination of home hardening measures and defensible space, the estimates are put you between, it's like 47 to 58% higher chance of your home surviving a wildfire. So I think these things matter, but I also think it's nuanced with 92-mile-an-hour winds and drought conditions. It's incredible to see that there were homes that survived that kind of a wildfire. And that is the urban conflagration that's so much different of a fire than what you're dealing with the forest fires. So when the fire burns from the wildland and hits the community, and now you have homes burning, it's a much different kind of fire. And the conversations we've really been having are about, protecting your home, protecting your community, and protecting firefighters, disconnecting fences from homes, putting in vents, and then clearing vegetation and debris material where the embers are going to ignite in and close to your home. And then obviously having a backup, an evacuation route and a plan. So for me to come home to Arcata after these meetings and talking with people who lost so much, I want to change my gutters, and we're in a very kind of moderate fire hazard severity, but a lot of our communities are one way in and one way out, and the streets are narrow and fire trucks can't get in and out. And, you sort of you learn these really hard lessons from Paradise and what just coming off of what happened in Palisades. And then you come home to Humboldt and I'm like, oh my gosh, we have so many of the same contributing factors, but it's colder and wetter here, right? But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't care, right? So first thing my husband did, and I was talking to Jane about this, is he cut down the maples that were right next to our house. And I was like, where'd the trees go? And he was like, hey, they were within 5 feet of the house, so they're gone. So, we'll have time in Arcata to adopt this, but for folks who are in those very high fire hazard severity zones, I think these things can make a difference, but I don't think all fires are created equal. And with 90-mile-an-hour winds, I don't know what you can do other than just get out of there. It's been a heartbreaking year to sit and talk with folks and hear about just everything they've been through, and to watch the videos and from people's phones and just the firsthand. I'm glad you're okay.
We are
Okay.
a refuge, which is wonderful. At
Yeah.
least we think we are
Yeah.
because of the climate. But I really appreciate your giving this presentation and putting it all together for us. You work your butt off, is what I can say.
Yeah.
And it's hard when you've got 2 kids and you're all over the place and
Yeah.
attending all these meetings. And I know how hard you work.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and you do a great job. And this was a very good presentation. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Jane. And I'm, I'm part of your community. I turned 50 this year, so I'm 50 and better here in the next couple of years. So happy to be engaged with OLLI. And these are tough issues. I mean, we're all talking about forest and forestry and wildfire and what the future looks like in this space, and this community really cares about this subject. So, and I am your rep as the member of the Board of Forestry. I represent the North Coast, so happy to engage in conversations, even if you totally disagree with everything that comes out of my mouth. I'm still happy to have the conversation. So
But if we can find you at home, that's the
if
next.
you can find me, yeah, Jane's like, I haven't seen you in a while. Yeah, that was
Well,
my
I do
pleasure.
really appreciate, and I appreciate everybody who's come back for a second time in order to get the rest. And tell your friends who didn't come back a second time to go online and watch the rest. And thank you all for attending our Brown Bag Lunch series in the spring. And we are moving on to our first one in the summer on July 6th. And you can sign up for OLLI again for the next year right now. You can sign up to get the newsletter, and it has the information in it. And we will be resuming July 6th through August 17th. A whole new set of 7 presentations. So thank you so much for coming. And hopefully we answered all your questions. I think you were very thorough, Elicia.
Oh, good. Okay, great. All right. Yeah, I go on tangents. So thank you everyone for your patience.
No problem. That's what we're here for. It's shutdown time.
Okay.